to the Better Gaming Show, where we explore how to make gambling and gaming safe, secure, and socially balanced for everyone. I'm your host, Jim, and today we're going to talk about something that doesn't get enough attention in our industry discussion, and it's all about the people working in the sector. We spend a lot of time talking about regulation, technology, and news stories, but what if the real key to transforming the gambling industry lies in transforming the people who work within it? And what better time to say hello to my next guest, Shaun Burke. Hey, Shaun, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Jim. Yeah, thank you for having me today.
Good stuff. It's a pleasure having you on. Now, Shaun spent 7 years as a responsible gambling manager at Betway Group before making a career pivot just over a year ago in March 24, when he launched Elevate Success Coaching, becoming a transformational life coach. You might be thinking, what does life coaching have to do with the gambling industry and gambling reform? Well, that's what we're going to look into today. Personally, I think better people make better businesses, and there's an opportunity for the gambling industry to change. And for that to happen, we need to start with the individuals working inside these companies, not just for their skills or knowledge, but their mindset, their values, and how they navigate the tensions between profits and player protection. In other words, doing what's right for the players and at the same time meeting commercial targets. It's about moving from compliance-driven thinking to purpose-driven action. There's plenty to tuck into and many avenues and roads that we're going to probably go down. But let's start at the beginning. And Shaun, how did you start in gambling and how did you move into responsible gambling?
Okay, yeah, sure. Great. So I started in the gambling industry a long time ago now, way back in 2006. And this was in the Ladbrokes. I used to work in areas like Elephant and Castle, Acre Lane, and just managing these shops. No existence of responsible gambling at all. Obviously, back then there was no training. We had a lot of people quite aggressive towards the FOBT machines, playing roulette and smashing machines, and people coming in with their last pounds and people coming in with their checks that they just got for work and just blowing it. And we kind of had why would you do that? And no idea what it meant to intervene or do interactions at that moment in time. So I was there for about 5 years. I wanted to get into the creative industry initially, wanted to do VFX and make games myself. So I went to a company called Game Account Network. So they created content themselves. They actually created the games. So I thought that might be a good place to start. I ended up doing QA testing there, became the QA lead. They eventually started to move into the US. I think it was New Jersey back then that were beginning to regulate over there. So as the person, they didn't really have compliance people back then. So as the person that knew the games the best and knew the website the best, I was sent over to speak to the regulators to make sure we were compliant in all of their requirements. So that was my first start pivot into compliance world. They eventually got a compliance director, and the person that they hired for proposition to me, would you like to come into compliance and work with me and kind of build out the compliance unit of the company? I said, great, let's do it. So I did that for a year or so before moving to Betway. And I went to Betway as I think it was a project compliance coordinator, something along those lines. But my first project was, we need something, we need to really look into what customer interaction is. This is something we need to build out. My investigation into that quickly expanded and realized this was quite a big project, something bigger than we anticipated. And I think within a month or two of that project, the director at the time said, look, this is bigger than we anticipated. This needs a lot of focus. This needs dedication. Would you like to move into responsible gambling and just be the responsible gambling manager? So we didn't really have RG people in compliance. Back then we had the AML guys, we had the compliance teams that were kind of covering these bases, but to begin building out a dedicated team is what happened. So that was the beginning of, my deep dive into responsible gambling. Fast forward 7 years, the team really grew. Our expertise in responsible gambling really grew. I was the point person for external contacts and companies and the rep. So I had a lot of relationships with different companies doing lived experience and had these different workshops. So I was always trying to get new training into the business. So there was a lot of learning that took place there, as well as my own understanding of the journals, understanding the mind, understanding the research, trying to get to grips with addiction, basically. Why do people gamble excessively? Why do people gamble beyond their means? And that really intrigued me. So I really enjoyed learning, understanding the brain, understanding the mind, and how I can apply those learnings to create a safer environment for our customers at Betway.
Really, I guess over in that time, it must have changed massively then. I mean, you're already talking about the scaling of the operations in terms of responsible gambling, the teams rather. What sort of size in personnel was that?
Yeah, so obviously I was the first RG person that existed. As we were looking into what was required, especially fact, like I said, the first project was customer interaction. We were getting in different companies at the time, for example, like BetBuddy, Necton, and trying to just look at what we can do. We got in an RG consultant from Gambling Integrity who kind of helped us build that out, so bringing in the expertise which I could also learn from. We eventually decided, so we had a company or a paired company in Cape Town. So we had an office in Cape Town with Digi Outsource. So we started building out a team there of people that could do the interactions. So we decided to create the customer interaction model in-house from the data team. And, we had some really serious talent in Betway in terms of the data team and the data science. So we wanted to, we could build out that knowledge ourselves, build the algorithm to detect problem gamblers or people starting to show signs. And then we needed to then decide, okay, what do we do with them? So we started building the team out in Cape Town. We eventually got more staff on the UK side as well. So we had affordability specialists that were doing assessments. We had a head of the department eventually. We had operations specialists. We had customer interaction specialists on the UK side. So we had the team. I think the largest amount we had on the UK side was about 7 or 8 of us, kind of different managers, basically different areas of RG, because we had so many different licenses as well. So there was always different versions of RG depending on the license area that we were in. And in Cape Town, the last number that I recall was around 45 to 48 members of staff. This team had to be that big because it was 24/7. So we had to have someone, we would shift work 24. If someone was spiking their activity, at 3 in the morning, we had to be able to react to that and intervene where necessary. So the team grew quite large in that time.
A fascinating insight, really, into the operators, because I think as an outsider myself, understanding the scale that operators are prepared to invest in responsible gambling is almost contrary to the headlines that you'd see from, a lot of the gambling harm charities. And yeah, it's just reassuring just to see the amount of money and resources that they're prepared to invest in order to try and cover off the growing problem of gambling harm.
Yeah, definitely. There was so much meetings, time, and investment into trying to understand what we can do to help people at harm. One of the best things that we did do was a lot of the lived experience groups. So we ran some focus groups in house as well. We had companies like Bet No More that really was a great help in the lived experience talent that they had. We had reached out to people in different charities at different sectors. We had sessions with YGAM, we had sessions with Gordon Moody, Better Change. So there was a lot of trying to understand from the perspective of the operator, from the perspective of someone that has actually been through the issues. So we would, for example, one of the workshops we would do is we would bring in lived experience people that had faced addiction, that had gone down the wrong path, and kind of looked at what their journey into that issue was, the escalation from recreational up to, okay, maybe they're compulsive, maybe they're actually a problem gambler, and looking at the measures that we had, how did that align? How would that have been effective for you? If we had done this at this point, would that have been effective? Would you have ignored it? And trying to get their feedback and then adjust based on that. So that was really insightful because it's hard to make decisions and be objective, when you haven't experienced it at all. So you have to look at all sides of the coin and say, okay, what can we do? So these were very insightful workshops that we ran.
Before we go into the workshops, obviously at the beginning there, I mentioned that we're going to go down different avenues, and it's your fault, Shaun, for mentioning it, because you mentioned the charities like Gordon Moody, like Better Change, all who work with the operators. Obviously, they're in a state of flux at the moment in terms of funding. It's quite worrying times, really, for the industry, that particular part of the industry, in terms of what's going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of what's been going on in the political landscape, and it just seems to be a large misunderstanding of what these organizations have been doing. I don't know if they can see the value that has been done. I don't know if they were aware of the work that they've been putting in, and as a result of the operators that what we've done in response, or what operators have done in response to the work that they've done. So yeah, it's quite disheartening to see what has happened and how funding has been basically cut for a lot of these guys that have been doing amazing work. So these are, like I mentioned, some organizations and charities that have people that have been through the trenches, have been through serious conditions, that have been through serious addictions. They've come out the other side and they've decided that they want to help and try to prepare the industry as much as possible and try to help people recover and try to help avoid people getting to that point by sharing their insights, by sharing their journeys. And there are operators out there that genuinely care and want to avoid that as well. So it makes sense for them to provide that insight and for operators to try and align what their RG measures are to get to that outcome. But yeah, I'm not sure how this is going to go, how it's going to pan out, and if there can be a resolution that serves all. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it feels like the government and gambling commission there's been decisions that have been made by various people. I don't know to what extent, but it feels to me that there should be, or there needs to be, some sort of step in by operators to help just back these companies up until the situation is cleared up, and that the funding starts flowing again. So that would be my wish, in that current state. So, what was the reason for moving out of responsible gambling and going towards transformational coaching?
Yeah, so they're interesting pivot, not one that I foresaw happening. Whilst I was working in the gambling industry, I was also working at a charity, social mobility charity for young adults to just basically help prepare them for the world. This consisted of providing and facilitating basically mindset mastery workshops, making sure they understood themselves. So it would be modules, for example, on your purpose, your identity, leadership. It would be emotional intelligence. It would be on what is success. So just trying to prepare them from a mental perspective, and as well as practical skills and knowledge, which might be corporate etiquette, it might be breath work to regulate the nervous system, it might be financial literacy, just how to move in the working world. And I was on my own journey at the same time. Like I said, I was always trying to understand the brain and the mind via my work in the gambling industry for that reason, understanding dopamine, understanding why people do what they do. And then at the same time on this growth journey personally and with the charity, and trying to put these young people in the greatest mindset and in the greatest headspace possible for them to excel in the working world. So I really enjoyed that line of work, and I really enjoyed the gambling side of stuff as well. The gambling world for me was a little bit frustrating because we all had this passion and this drive to try and help relieve the gambling issues and the problem of gambling and come together. But there are always certain blockers and things in place that wasn't making it. I felt as impactful as I could have been. That's another question. But there was just a little bit of frustration there in terms of, are we actually making an impact, or it seemed a bit slow. But for me personally, I was just really enjoying that work and seeing transformation in these young people, and really thought that this type of information was very vital and crucial to get out, and especially at a younger age. So fast forward up to around 3. So I've been doing this work on the side for about maybe 5 years at that point. Um, and I just got to a point where I'd been in the industry for a long time. I had had my first child in 2020 during the pandemic, and I had a moment during that year 2020. We just gone into lockdown. I just had my first child. It was an incredibly difficult time, to say the least, in terms of just mental fortitude was really needed. And I had been learning these techniques, and I had been teaching these techniques, but it was a time that I was tested. And, as the world has seen, mental health has really, the awareness of it has spiked since the pandemic, because it put people in that place where, you're isolated. You couldn't even go for walks a lot of the time. You couldn't see your family and your friends. And at the same time, I was having my first child. I wasn't getting any sleep. I wasn't getting to socialize. I wasn't getting to go to the gym. The gyms were closed. That used to be like a therapy for me. So it was a very, very challenging time. And I really had to fall back on the information I had. I had to put things in place, or I would have crumbled. So again, that was clarity for me of how important that type of knowledge and tools is to get into the world. So I thought, what, up to forward fast to 2023, I thought, I really want to get into this work. I want to do more of this. And I decided that this is something that I want to kind of move into, which was the coaching and just basically being able to spread this knowledge, because I felt it really lit me up when I was doing that work. And I just thought it was important to release that type of information and make sure people are aware and can get through those tough times and can be supported through those tough times if needed as well.
And do you think there's a real opportunity to apply this practices, to apply this thinking to not just responsible gambling teams, but also to gambling companies and gambling leadership, just to make them more emotionally intelligent, as one of the metrics was?
Yeah, 100%. And that is part of the vision that I saw. And you even mentioned it, I think, in the intro, in terms of how does this work even relate to the gambling industry, and I believe it relates to humans in general. Like, if you work on the individual as a holistically, if you work on the person's mindset, if somebody raises their emotional intelligence significantly, it just has an effect on every single aspect of their life. And most importantly, their personal life and their relationships there, and their just level of happiness, their level of their ability to just cope when adversity comes up. And of course, that then translates into work, into your cohesion with your teams, how you communicate with people, how you be as productive as possible, it equates to your efforts and what your results are at work. And then if you relate that to responsible gambling, and that was one of the frustrations I had. I realized that people that usually get into gambling harms, gambling is the secondary part of the problem. There's usually something else going on in someone's life that they haven't been able to process, or they don't know how to process. They don't even have the awareness of why they feel the way that they feel, what is going on with them mentally, what's going on with them in their personal life. And they're trying to escape that via some type of vice, whether that be smoking, whether that be gambling, whatever it may be. There's a negative release of this emotion or this energy of what's going on. So I really began to see how clear, well, it would be great if somebody went through like the programs that we were running in terms of their the emotional intelligence, the ability to process what is going on in their life in healthy ways, rather than go into gambling as an example. That was another one of the reasons I feel like the work that I was moving into was a bit more impactful. I've been in the industry so long, my whole network is gambling companies, gambling people. So when I went into coaching, I thought, okay, I'm kind of leaving the gambling industry now, but not so much, because when you're trying to grow a business, you reach out to your network, and your network is the gambling industry. And I started to really see, well, this is a potential to build something that could really hit home, really make an impact. It's difficult, I believe, obviously, to do that at this stage from an operator's perspective, for someone that is already at that point where they're starting to obviously get into excessive gambling. And so like, we can't just educate, oh yeah, come and do this emotional intelligence class and then come back to the site. But yeah, this is where the potential lies, though.
And how do you roll out these programs to the teams or individuals? Is it online? Is it face to face? Is it a mixture of like role play, or a mixture of everything?
So this would be something, even if I give the example of a coaching someone one-on-one, though there are frameworks and rough edges of programs that can be rolled out, you meet the client where they're at. So if it was one-on-one, you'd find out where they're at, what they need, and then we figure out what's the best route to do. You would do the same with a company. So people that have their own RG programs and their own RG measures, I wouldn't go in and say, all right, you need to do this, this, and this. That's not how life works. You go in and find out, okay, where are they at? What have they done? What have they found that works, that doesn't work? And you just try to embed the learnings that you have into what they're doing. So in regards to the workshops that I used to have with these these companies that came in, they would give great insights into even how you word emails. People don't like being told what to do. That is just a fact. There's something called psychological reactance. Like there's just something that triggers you. Is like, oh, you told me to do it. I don't like the way you did it for whatever reason. Oh, I was going to do it anyway. You know, you even look at children. It's just from the beginning, they don't like being told what to do. So you figure out, how do you make someone do something that it feels like it's coming from them? So this is the autonomy that humans like to have. So it's about trying to not say, oh, you set a deposit limit. It's like you can't just demand people to do stuff. It's about how can we create a journey where people have the autonomy, but and activate, you know, what we know about dopamine and the reward system to make them think that this is something they wanted to do. Okay, I've completed this, and give them some type of dopamine release along that way. So we're creating the same dopamine rewards that they're getting from gambling, which may lead to some type of excessive behavior, but use those same systems and the same way, the neuroscience of how to get them to develop dopamine reward systems for stuff that we feel is more positive and in line with the journeys that we want them to have. And that's all we can do at this stage with an operator. It's like, what can we do with the journey that we have at the point that we have at this moment in time? We can't go back and, you know, give people training and tell them, oh, you got to go through this course before you play with us. They're just going to go somewhere else, which is, again, one of the frustrations with the industry. If you do too much to create too much friction. But what we do have, what can we embed from a neuroscience perspective?
Just because you mentioned neuroscience there, when you were giving that answer, obviously one of the key issues of the day is neurodiversity. How does it sit alongside neurodiverse individuals and teams that have neurodiverse people in them?
So in terms of, the teams, though it's been talked about a lot, it's still something that some people just don't really understand sometimes, or some people will have a perception of what neurodiverse means, or someone with ADHD means. Some people have negative connotations of it. And I think it's human nature. Sometimes people that, if you don't understand something, they kind of fear it, or they just make up something about it and want to avoid it. So coming into teams in any organization, regardless if it's RG or not, it's always good to have these discussions. So people, first of all, understand what it means, what the implications are, that it's just people have their own individual brains and it works maybe slightly differently to you. I don't even like referring to it as, oh, it's a divergence from the norm, which is what some people like to categorize it as. It's just everyone's brain is unique and everyone's brain works in a certain way. They will see something different to the way you see something again. And again, that is human nature. We all see the world from our own perspective. We all have a perspective that has been shaped by our life, by our beliefs, by what we've experienced. And now we process information in our unique way. It's the same thing. It's just a wider scale. So giving people the education, like, oh, okay, it's just how they view the world, on how they process information, or how I process information, is just slightly different. Understanding that, you begin to see how useful that is, how empowering that may be for the individual and for other teams as well, as managers, to be like, okay, I've got a wider spectrum of insight here. I've got a wider spectrum of perspective. Now let's tackle this problem with this wider view. And you're likely, if you give that space, if you create that psychological safety for people to express themselves, you're going to get more answers out of it. You're going to get more solutions out of it. So when you have that type of discussion and you create that type of space in an organization or in a team, there's no choice but for the cohesion to just elevate, for people's safety to kind of increase, and for them to be like, they have that ability to say, oh, you know what about this? Oh, I'm not sure that's going to work because I have this view. Everyone feels safe to express in that way and see the value in people's differences and the way that they see and approach work and issues. It's just going to create elevation in all areas and productivity.
Yeah, I find it very similar to, I was talking to somebody recently, and because neurodiversity is talked a lot about in the workplace that I'm at the moment, but also I was talking to somebody from a gambling charity who was focusing on menopausal women as being a high propensity. And it's just, it is that perspective that you talk about. A very limited experience of it. And because of that, I haven't given it much headspace. And when somebody just flags something up, it almost sort of interrupts your pattern of thinking. And you're like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's that open-mindedness that I think this sort of coaching provides for not only individuals, as you said, but also teams and companies.
Yeah. 100%. And yeah, that's another perfect example of something that you might not have a lot of experience in, like, or knowledge about menopausal women. So there's something inside you that's like, oh, okay, yeah, either one might want to avoid it, or you might have formed an opinion that you've heard somewhere that has just influenced and you didn't even realize in your subconscious, and it just creates a reaction that just doesn't really align with understanding and investing and trying to, okay, I don't understand this, but let me lean into this and find out more. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. Maybe it's something that I could do to help. It's just, like you said, that open-mindedness. Oh, I don't really know enough about that. I have these views, but I don't know where those views came from potentially. Let me lean into it and understand. So if a workplace can provide those type of environments, the type of ability to engage with people that can give them a better understanding, then your perspective and knowledge then begins to widen and creates a safer environment to kind of learn and move differently.
Yeah, and I believe it's having the confidence, it's building the confidence to be able to be, I hate to say it because I think it's an overused word at the moment, but that vulnerability of being able to say, I don't know, I haven't got the answer. And that leads into this whole gambling harms element whereby, it might be okay just to say, we haven't got the answer yet, but we're working on it. Will go to some degree to help resolving the problem.
Yeah, 100%. And that is a great point, even going back to my previous point on the psychological safety element. So people need to feel that they can say something and feel like they should know all the answers, or feel like they can say something and it not be right, or feel like they can say something and be like, well, actually, it's okay for me to say something because that's just how I feel, or it's okay for me to share this even though it might not be right, knowing that there's not going to be no repercussions for saying something that's not right, that doesn't go well, that sounds like something, oh, maybe I should know this. I can't let people know that I don't know this. Otherwise, what they're going to, all of these things just kind of limit people and hold people back and down and stop them expressing themselves. So when they feel that safety to be vulnerable, to express these views, that it makes such a huge difference, such a huge difference.
And do you think that's a common trait in all companies, I guess, not just gambling ones,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, 100%. I think I had this conversation not long ago about what professionalism means, and you have to be professional when you're at work. And yes, I understand that you've got to have a professional etiquette, right? You wouldn't do all the things you do in your living room when you when you're not at work in an office building. But that professionalism has begin to absorb what you say. Like, again, all the things I just mentioned, well, you can't say this and you can't say that and you can't get things wrong. If you're suggesting something in a project, it's got to be perfect. And so again, this is starting to limit people's expression and people's ability to be vulnerable, basically. Like, even that vulnerability is maybe not seen as professional in a lot of people's mind. You can't be expressive. I'm not saying you crash out and smash a table at work or whatever if you if you feel angry, but being able to express that you're angry or frustrated about something should be accepted. Being able to understand that you don't understand something or you don't really like the way this works, and can we come at it this way, is the only way that those feelings are going to dissolve. It's the only way those feelings a lot of the time are going to be resolved. Otherwise, you're just holding it in. You're not saying it to no one. How is it going to be worked on? How is it going to be tackled in any way? Okay, just push it down. I won't say it. And these little things build up over time. And I always say stuff like what you're feeling at work builds up. If we're talking about RG teams that are doing crisis talks and they're having, quite serious discussions with people about how they're feeling in a negative way, and people are taking that in and not able to release that, not able to debrief on that, not able to release that tension, there's going to be a bursting point at some point in some shape or form.
Just quickly, because we're being quite open, changing lanes a little bit. Did you ever feel conflicted working in the gambling industry?
I did, definitely, because there was always a balance, right? And it's a right balance of commerciality versus what we're trying to do in terms of support people that potentially could be at harm, in terms of the measures that we're rolling out. So what was one of the frustrations that I did feel is that we were trying to assess people as early as possible, for example, and we introduced affordability, way ahead of when it was supposedly going to be imposed as well. So trying to get assessments on how much can this person afford to spend, for example. But again, there was always a friction point that was created when a person got to a certain threshold. We would ask for an affordability assessment and, waiting for that to allow that person to continue to gamble. But the issues that would bring up is we're creating more friction, and other operators might not be doing the same level of assessments and affordability assessment, or they might do it later. So someone could get to our assessments and be like, this is taking too long, I don't want to do this, I'm just going to go somewhere else. And there was that, because the industry wasn't unified in that sense, which is not something an operator could do, that would, I believe, maybe have to come from regulatory level. There was that, how much impact are we actually making? Yes, we're making sure that the customers on our platform are not going beyond this point without getting affordability assessment. But they always have the option to just go somewhere else. Even if we all had unified levels, they can get to that level here and then go to another operator, get to that level there. So this is sometimes where I felt like there needs to be a little bit more unification. And it's been talked about a lot of the time, for example, such as, like the one data center of a user. Like you would have one, for example, one ID, user ID to get onto a gambling site. You'd have to use that same ID to get onto another site. So you couldn't surpass all the different levels, and we kind of had a full picture. But, that's easier said than done. You've got GDPR to consider here, and data protection, and that would have to be enforced from a regulatory perspective. So yeah, it has its difficulties. And again, there was that foundational realization that I had that, but this is a secondary problem. How do we help people from the perspective that they don't need to get to this point where they're gambling beyond their means, that they're trying to escape reality for some reason? How do we get them to process their emotions in a different way? How do we get them to process whatever's going on in their life before that? And what hope do we have to do that as an operator that's only seeing them beginning to spike at that point? So, which is kind of what pushed me more into the coaching realm, because I feel like I could get that information hopefully to people sooner rather than later.
I've always felt that the sort of responsible gambling teams, or the people working in that space, have a real difficult task, because they're working on day to day. They're looking at the cases that are coming in. They're seeing the challenges that people are having. So they're in sort of almost daily contact with all of those elements of it. But then on the flip side, internally within their teams, they're probably talking to people who don't have, or have very limited sight on that, and are more interested in commercial targets, either product or game development or commercial awareness. So they're doing sponsorships. They're not getting to see to the same degree the amount of challenges that are being presented to the responsible gambling team. So I've always felt that it's a real conflicted and real tough job to, as I said, going earlier about, whether it's that humanity or the compliance driven element of the actions versus the commercial targets.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that is not easy to overcome at all. But yeah, it doesn't mean we give up. There's always, okay, this is where we're at. This is the point that we get. Then what can we do? How can we create the balance as much as possible? How can we ensure people don't experience harm and make the business viable at the same time, but not at the expense of the RG measures that they have?
Again, as an outsider, I would have probably just have to say I don't have the answer. It's not as if I'd could work out what to do in this situation. I don't think I've got the answer at the moment. I think a lot more intelligent and cleverer people can try. If you could wave a magic wand, what would proper responsible gambling culture actually look like within teams?
So within teams, I think that's a good area to start. And the way, and a good example to use is the parent and child relationship. You can't expect to instill and create emotional intelligence in a child unless you're working on that yourself and you're being the example of that. So shouting at your child and telling them to stop crying and behave yourself, but you're shouting and you're not reining in your own nervous system. So from that perspective, when you look at a safer gambling teams, I think it is crucial to give them the education and give them the knowledge and give them the training to instill emotional intelligence, to elevate emotional intelligence, to create adversity resilience in them, to make them understand their brains to the best of their ability. Like everyone's trying to understand AI and AI prompts, but we don't have the prompts for our brain to be able to understand, to get the best out of our own brains. So that is first and foremost crucial to the RG teams, because for one, they're having these interactions and these calls and experiencing potentially these quite intensive and emotionally triggering calls and interactions. So how do they process that themselves? Otherwise, they're going to just gradually fill up with this negative intake, and they need to be able to release that themselves. But then they can also be trained in how to subtly have those conversations. So how do they pick up on things during the calls? How can they word their responses and word what they're trying to create nudges for them to give customers that they're speaking to the autonomy to understand what they're saying and actually decide, you know what, I think I am going to do this, or I'm going to look into this, rather than saying, oh, you've been spending too much. Yes, maybe you should set a deposit limit. But yeah, you should take a break. It doesn't really, humans don't really work like that. So it's about having them the ability to create these kind of higher level conversations and make things a bit more subtle to allow people and customers that they're speaking to respond and take the action seemingly by themselves and have that autonomy to just, they've been laid out the options and it makes sense for them to do. For example, you know what, I've decided, yeah, I am going to take a break, and this is how I'm going to think about my budget in this time. And yeah, this should be something more leisure. And lately, it's been a bit more over the top and it's affected me, or getting them to talk to someone else that is they've been signposted to. So yeah, treating people as adults, but whilst giving them a little bit of knowledge to make those informed decisions themselves.
And if the companies and the industry get this right, where do you see gambling in years' time?
Yes, if they were to get this perfectly right, and there's no such thing as perfect, but
Big
yes,
question.
to get it as good as possible. I think, it would things. I think things have been gradually getting better over the years, but the better we get this information out, and we get this type of emotional regulation out there, and we get that embedded into communication, we get that embedded into interactions, and people start taking the actions to look at this themselves in their own personal life, which we can't do, but maybe do a bit more deeper understanding of themselves. It will get to the point where the numbers just plummet in terms of people doing excessive gambling and realizing and putting it in that same category as going to the cinema, as, just having a social drink with friends or going out to dinner. They will have a budget. I spend X amount of money on gambling every month. It's part of ritual I do with my team, like Liverpool's playing, I want to put this bet on, it's going to add a bit more excitement. And that's what it is, rather than seeing it as, I'm stressed out, I need to go and put a bet on. So they don't even care what it is. They're betting on teams that they've never even heard of, or no, what's on now, or seeing it as a way to make money. That's what gambling is about. Even that, sometimes, the gambling fallacy still exists out there. So that's still part of the education. People don't really understand that there's no winning in this. Okay, you may be a professional, skilled poker player, that's a skill-based game, which you can have influence on the better your skills are. But for the majority of, the random gambling elements, they feel like, oh yeah, I've got my trick, my solution to the slots machines and stuff like that. Even that education and making sure that's embedded properly, and that really grows and under that understanding. If that is done right, they're not going to come in with these gambling fallacies. They're going to understand that for most levels of gambling, this is just supposed to be recreational. This is supposed to be a little fun. I'm going to have my set budgets for it. I'm going to get to a point. That didn't go well, so I've hit my limit for the month. I'll maybe come back in a few weeks, and then everyone will be happy. People will understand that when they are stressed out, when things are not going right, that gambling isn't the answer to relieve that stress, because your brain has been hijacked. You're not really thinking straight. You're going to be in the zone, and you're not even going to know what is going on, how much money you have spent. So it's going to avoid getting to that point. That's where we need to get to, getting people the level of education, the level of emotional intelligence, where they can take control of their own life. They identify something that is an issue going on in their life, or something that they need to process, and they take care of that themselves. They know what they need to do for themselves individually. That is going to relieve whatever that tension is, whatever that stress is, and leave gambling in that realm of leisure entertainment. And I think we are getting there, and it's just how we can get there more efficiently is what needs to be done.
Great answer. Right, last question. Listen, Shaun, clearly demonstrated you've got a wealth of experience in responsible gambling. If there's somebody watching this now who's just, in their formative years, or they've just started a role in a responsible gambling team, what would be your one or two bits of key advice for them?
In terms of, I think, again, like we've said a couple of times during our talk today, is just work on yourself individually. This is where real change happens. Someone asked, if you want to change the world, you start by changing yourself. And so if you work on yourself, work on what your versions of self-care are, make sure that is a priority for you. Understand your stresses, your triggers, and understand how you can begin to make sure that you have a set routine, a set pattern, certain tools that you can go to, certain events that you can do in terms of just going for wherever it may be, that you can regulate your own nervous system. You know how to process anything that's going on in your life, because that is what is going to be the deciding factor in how you then move in the world. That's going to affect the people around you, and that's going to affect the conversations that you start to have when you interact with people. When you get into specifically the RG space, this is then when you can look at to how you apply that same knowledge that now you have to someone else without directly telling them what to do, because that doesn't work. So, okay, I know how to look after myself. I know how to, apply self-care to myself and make sure I'm not too stressed out. I know that I can identify when I am getting to that point. Okay, I'm starting to get to that point. I need to do X, Y, Z. I need to make sure that I can release my tension in this way. So it's like, again, how do you apply that with your interactions and the conversations that you had? How do you mention subtle activities or subtle suggestions? How do you educate people in the conversational sense? How do you educate people in an email sense or a text sense, however you communicate with customers? And then as a wider team and as a wider company, as an operator, how do you do the same in terms of your marketing, in terms of the emails that go out? In part of your customer journey is a big one. Like, if a new customer joins the website, what is in your journey plan that is going to give them those subtle nudges, that subtle autonomy for the customer to want to be able to actually put things in place that is going to contribute to their self-care, that's going to contribute to them realizing that this should be just a leisure activity. This isn't something for me to make money from. This is something that I shouldn't do when I'm emotionally hijacked or stressed out, for example. How do we get that information across without just sending them a blanket generic email every couple of weeks or saying, yes, set a deposit limit? So it's about just thinking about it a little bit more in an efficient and smart manner to treat people like they can make the decision and giving them autonomy to do so.
Well, listen, that sounds like an absolute no-brainer for me, that, every operator should be looking to elevate their teams to that standard and openness and, as you say, emotional intelligence and just the sensitivities of the subject that are around. So just quickly, if people wanted to get in contact with you or find out a bit more information about your coaching programs, where can they find out more info?
Yeah, sure. So you can just contact me on LinkedIn, Shaun Burke. I'm sure you'll find it, or there might be a link to me on this post. Or I do have a website, which is elevatesuccesscoaching.com. But yeah, anywhere you can find me, just reach out. I'm always happy to have these conversations. This is what I enjoy doing. So, and then in terms of the programs, like I mentioned earlier, this is something where it would meet where you're at. So I have frameworks and I have a lot of connections that could build programs, but we would see where you're at first and where would be best fit to come in and kind of assist you in building something out, and especially in dressing teams directly, as that should always be the foundation of growing an effective RG team.
Nice. Well, I'll put those website and email address in the show notes to this episode. Shaun, that just leaves me just to say thanks a million for your time today, your insight and your experience, and just putting that human touch to this very sensitive subject is really insightful. I've really enjoyed the chat. So thanks a million.
Thank you so much, Jim. Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation and the conversation we had prior to this. And yeah, I love that we can get this information out and everyone has the same mission. So hopefully we can get there together as efficiently as possible.
Nice one. We're on it. Okay, that's all for this episode. Stay tuned for the next one. See you later.
Cheers. Thanks.